Just a quick note on the audio quality in this episode. I've never recorded two people in person before, so I didn't quite get it right. For the first 3 minutes of the episode, Brian is clipping, which just means he was too loud. I realized what was going on. I turned him down. There's also a fair bit of plosives where you can hear like wind going over the microphone coming from my mouth. I apologize for that. I did my best to clean it up in the edit. We'll be back to a normal episode next month. Without further ado, enjoy the show.
Steady, Robin, is just an acrophobic illusion.
Acrophobic.
Your fear of heights. You've got to close your mind to it.
This is the best.
When did Batman have his first origin story? In the various universes, are there different origin stories? We'll talk about that and more today. I'm Brian.
And I'm Alex.
And this is Bat Lessons. Hey, Alex, it looks like the tables are turned today.
Yeah.
I'm going to be running the show as the researcher and faux professor on this episode.
I feel like a little bit like I'm without my safety wire, my safety blanket. I don't have notes. It's kind of interesting.
It's going to be an interesting one, yeah. So try to act, you know a ton about this stuff, so try to act like some of this information is new to you.
Okay, I can do that. I mean, I think you're probably going to come out with a lot of stuff I don't know. If anything, I'm going to be embarrassed about the things I don't know.
Well, hopefully you're not embarrassed because we're trying to educate a lot of people on this.
Yeah. Did you want to tell people about the sort of like circumstance that we're in presently?
Sure.
So we might sound a little bit different today because we're in person. We're sitting next to each other. It's kind of cool.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah, we our families just had a nice little Thanksgiving together, and we're at an Airbnb in sunny California. It's the Friday after Thanksgiving. We're outside. You might be able to hear a wind chime in the distance.
I can hear wind chimes.
And yeah, I thought it'd be cool to record in person when we get the chance. I bought just like the cheapest microphones. These are the Shure SM58 knockoffs, but they're supposed to sound good, but they have handling noise. So if you hear some rattling, then...
Handling noise.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll try to edit
know.
around it, but...
Yeah, hopefully people will give us a little bit of grace. It is Thanksgiving after all.
Indeed, yes. I'm thankful for our listeners.
Yeah, as am I. I'm thankful for technology, so we can do this out in the backyard in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's
not have
cool.
our like mega system like we do at home.
Indeed.
Okay, well, I want to start out. So we're talking about Batman Origins.
Yes.
And I want to start by getting this out of the way. Almost everyone knows the basic origin story of Batman.
Right.
In my research, I saw this great Reddit comment that said, at this point, literally everyone knows his origin. People who live in huts in remote villages know it.
Yeah.
So the idea here is I'm going to be talking about like all the different distinct origin story information. Hopefully, like land something interesting on top of the stuff that like everyone just kind of knows.
Okay.
All right. So and everyone knows this part, so I'm just gonna lay that out up front. So Bruce Wayne is a child. He's leaving a theater with his parents, Thomas and Martha Wayne. They walk down a dark alley. They get robbed. And in the process of getting robbed, Bruce's parents, Thomas and Martha Wayne, are shot and killed. Murdered in the street, in the alley. So this traumatic event and its connection to the criminal element solidifies Bruce's fate to become the masked vigilante crime fighter that we all recognize as Batman. So everyone knows that one. So we should talk about like what my definition of origin story is when I was going into the research.
I feel like you've given us a little bit of it already.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
This might not be something that has like a lot of broad agreement. So
sure,
it's not just what happened when he was a kid. For me, I'm defining it as like any event that led to the creation of Batman right up until the point he puts on the suit for the first time.
Okay.
So some of these stories I'm going to tell will have huge cliffhangers, and it's basically going to be like he just put the suit on. You have to go read to find out
and
the rest.
Are these all comic stories for the first outing here? Or?
Maybe. So I'm in my research, I tried to cover all the origin stories everywhere. So I do cover movies. I do cover some TV shows, some animated stuff. I don't know if we're actually going to have time to get to all that today. From what I've seen, there's only one of those like cinematic universe things that brings something new to the table. Everything else is just kind of ripped from the comics.
Okay.
So the most of the interesting things I'm going to tell you are coming from the comics.
Gotcha. Sounds good.
with that out of the way, we need to do a deep dive on this and the different impacts, different moments that impact Bruce's overall motivation and psychology. So chronologically, DC 33, Detective Comics number 33, released November 1939.
That's right. So I have a little bit of context on this one, if you don't mind. So this is during the Gardner Fox run. I don't know if you remember, we were talking about a couple episodes ago that Bill Finger writes the first 2 issues of Batman, and then the next 7 are written by Gardner Fox. But it is interesting to say that this origin story that we're getting ready to talk about, 2 pages, is broadly agreed upon to be considered to be written by Bill Finger, not Gardner Fox. So Detective Comics 33 is a Gardner Fox issue, but Bill Finger wrote the story. At least that's the popular consensus. There is a book called, let me pull it up. There's a book called The Forgotten All-Star, a biography of Gardner Fox written by Jennifer DeRoss. It's a biography of Gardner Fox. And I don't think she said it in the book, but she was on a podcast a few years ago called Word Balloon, where she speculated that perhaps this origin story was also written by Gardner Fox. So there's a little bit of contention. I don't think anyone's put it in writing as in an academic work. So take that as you will. But as with everything at this early stage, we don't exactly know who's responsible.
But not Bob Kane.
No,
Okay.
No, definitely not Bob Kane. He would have been drawing it, but
Cool. Okay, so DC 33, so just a few issues into the first run of Batman comics.
That's right.
Defines his first origin story. So essentially, young Bruce is walking home from a movie with his parents when a mugger attempts to grab his mother's necklace. This is Martha. So Bruce's dad, Thomas, steps in the way to protect her, saying, "Leave her alone, you." He gets cut off by the mugger saying, "You asked for it," and shoots Thomas Wayne. So some of these original stories are like pretty brutal, in like the way they depict robbers. So this guy, you asked for it, and he shoots Thomas Wayne. Martha starts to call out for the police, and the mugger says, "Well, this'll shut you up," and he shoots her as well, which is pretty intense. Brutal, and what a stone-cold criminal that they depict. Bruce stands in shock at his dead parents.
He's crying, right? If I remember correctly, I have this mental picture. Or is that from the next one we're talking about?
I think it might be the next one.
Okay, there's this image in my mind, just seared into my mind, of this little boy, just like tears streaming down his face.
I have links to every single comic
that
I pulled up, so we can go look.
Yeah. So page 2.
Yeah.
Right in the center top panel. Yeah, he's very sad.
Dead. They're dead.
Yeah.
So then days later, he kneels at his bed, presumably praying or something like that. And he says, and I'm going to do a lot of quotes. So, "And I swear by the spirits of my parents to avenge their deaths by spending the rest of my life warring on all criminals." The comic references his wealth, allowing him to be a crime fighter, detective, scientist, athlete, so on. As an adult, he says that he is ready but needs a disguise. Quote, "Criminals are a superstitious, cowardly lot, so my disguise must be able to strike terror into their hearts. I must be a creature of the night, black, terrible," end quote. And then a bat flies in the window, and he proclaims, "A bat, that's it. It's an omen. I shall become a bat." And there you have the original Batman origin story.
So inciting incident, which is the death of the parents, killed by a mugger. And then not much. There's not a whole lot of yada, yada, yada. He decides that bats are scary, which, side note, you grew up in the Midwest. You had bats, right? Were bats scary to you as a child?
Not to me.
They're kind of a nuisance, right?
Yeah, they're annoying. We had them in our house in like the attic, or
super common for people to have them in their attics. Pretty
common. And sometimes, pretty rarely, but sometimes they would get inside the house and you would catch them and try and get them out. Some people would kill them. The only scary thing about them is that they could be carrying rabies.
Right. If you're in a city, it's not all that different than a pigeon. They're ubiquitous. They're kind of annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people really like them. Like I know at Boy Scout camp, they talked about having these big bat houses, kind of like bird houses, near the pools.
Sure.
So that at night, when the lights were on, the bats would eat all the mosquitoes and they'd save all of us.
Yeah. So, that's nice.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he just says bats are scary. I'm going to be a bat.
Yep.
Okay. So the bat doesn't crash through a window.
Nope.
Okay. I'm sorry for skipping ahead. Sorry. Okay.
So like for me, like the bat thing at the end seems like a crazy coincidence. Like he's just chilling out in his office or study or whatever, and a bat flies in.
Yeah.
The other origins that we'll cover have him in a place that's much more narrowly focused on bat encounter potential.
Okay.
But in his office like this, it could have been anything. Like he could have been the bug man, the
Sure.
owlinator, a man that's a moon or something like
Right.
that. Like it's just a crazy coincidence, but that's how we got back.
It definitely feels like we're back solving from like they decided there was going to be a bat hero.
Oh, definitely. Like someone asked for an origin story and they were like, oh, what are we going to come up with?
Daddy issues,
Yeah.
mugger, you know.
But why a bat? Why a bat? Also, different from other stories, it's just the window is open and a bat flies in.
Okay.
Yeah. So I can show you the picture, but it's just windows open, bat flies in, and he's kind of like, whoa.
But he does see a bat.
Definitely sees the bat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
All right, so jump ahead a few years. That last one was 1939. We're jumping to 1948.
Yeah, when you told me that they redid it so early after this, we were before the show. We talked a little bit about what we were going to talk about. I was just surprised that so quickly we've revisited. Not much time has passed. They're going to retell the origin story.
Yeah. So this one is not Detective Comics. This is Batman.
Oh, okay.
Issue 47.
Right.
So that might be the reason that they do that. And this one adds more color to the history. So story begins with Batman and Robin investigating crime. They're talking to Commissioner Gordon, referencing a truck business owner change. And Commissioner Gordon says, the report says the new owner bought out the old owner, fired the old truckers, and hired a new staff. The owner's name is Joe Chill. Here's a radio photo of him.
Okay.
So that means nothing. So it's just some dude named Joe Chill.
Sure. But this is a classic Bill Finger, like businessman intrigue, like dispute. Very standard Bill Finger.
Batman is struck, just like shocked. He says, that face, after all these years, it is he, the face of the man who killed my parents.
I see. So and we go back. Was a flashback, I'm assuming. This is
well,
the
it's not
lead-in.
really a flashback so much. It's just like it's straight. He just says it.
Okay.
Like he's looking at the picture and he's like, I
Sure.
recognize this dude. So now, as the reader, as the audience, we know the name of their killer.
Right,
Joe
Joe
Chill. Right.
Yeah.
And this will be a recurring thing. So then at this point, the story flashes back and regurgitates the story of Thomas and Martha's death. One notable difference, and this is, I don't know if like the time from 1939 to 1948 like changed society or whatever, but one notable difference is that Joe Chill shoots Thomas, and then the story says that single bullet really killed two people, for Martha Wayne's weak heart stopped from the sudden shock.
Right.
So instead of killing the woman, she died of shock.
Right. I think that's probably a they're trying to soften it a little bit, right? We're not. It's less scandalous that a woman's not being shot in the story.
Yeah.
It's
That'd be my guess. I know there's some. I don't know all the dates for this. You might know, but there's some history about like censoring.
Yeah, so
comics and stuff.
this is pre-code. We'll get there.
Okay.
But it is post 1941 when basically when they decide no more guns. Right. There's kind of this moment where they decide to position him as a little bit more family friendly and wholesome. So it's after that. Yeah.
So then young Bruce, he shouts out at the killer, and then it says something about young Bruce's eyes made the killer retreat. They were accusing eyes that memorized his every feature, eyes that he would never forget.
Okay.
So the rest of the flashback is exactly the same as DC-33. Flash forward. Batman asks Commissioner Gordon if he can take the case himself. Robin senses the disturbance and asks, and Batman tells Robin about the history and recognizing him and stuff, and then he says he's got to do the job alone. He essentially says, like, Robin, I know you understand, but you're out on this one. So then he finds a way to confront Joe Chill alone. I'm jumping past a bunch of pages of setup and stuff, but in the confrontation, he reveals his name. He says, I am the son of the man you murdered. I am Bruce Wayne. I became Batman because of what you did, and I swore I'd arrest you for it someday. I can't prove your guilt, but I'll never stop hounding you until I do. Whatever you do, I'll be watching. Wherever you go, I'll be watching. I'll always be watching. And someday you'll make a mistake, and I'll be there, waiting. Remember that. It's kind of like a Sting song.
He'll be watching you. Yeah. It's kind of stupid because then Joe Chill goes and burns down Wayne Manor and credits.
That's what you think, yeah.
Yeah. By the way, this is who I am.
Yeah.
In hindsight, this seems pretty obvious, and probably will be the case for the rest of the stories. But in Detective 33, the very first time we see the Batman origin story, it's just 2 pages, and then the rest of the issue is a totally different story. It involves like dirigibles. Right? It's the first time we have the Zeppelins in the Batman story. This is not that, right? Like the origin story is there as a narrative device, right? Like the only reason we're retelling it is so that we can say, oh, this is Joe Chill, and then we go on and we do a whole different story, which is him, chasing him down, cornering him, confronting him, giving away his secret identity foolishly. I guess a lot of these are probably going to be they're telling us the story just to sort of contextualize something that follows.
Only a couple more.
Okay.
Yeah,
fair enough.
But the next one is really similar.
Okay. Does it just end? Is that how it?
No, there's
Okay.
more. So then Batman leaves because he's just given him the warning, but he can't arrest him yet, and Batman doesn't kill. So what can he do? He leaves. And Joe runs out to find some of his goons. He tells them what happened, and the goons are upset. You mean you're the reason for Batman? The guy who sent me up for 10 years? The 3 goons all turn on Joe and open fire. This is kind of wild.
Sure.
A little ham-fisted writing, in my opinion, but then they realize that they shot him before getting Batman's name. Batman rushes in and fights them to arrest them for murder, and he says, now I'll make sure you never hear what Chill might say. The fight ends, and Chill dies in Batman's arms. The issue ends with the murder of Thomas Wayne closed.
There you go. Wow. He gets closure. It's something that here's a question for you. Should Bruce Wayne have closure on the death of his parents? Is it so important as a motivation for his character that once he's done with this, he has no reason to be Batman anymore?
Well, so his thing before was that when he was a child,
Yeah.
and he is doing his prayer like avenge spirit thing, is he was saying that he would war on all criminals,
Right?
Not just I'll get vengeance for your death.
Right.
So it was this. I think it was kind of important as like a story setup device for like the rest of Batman's history to not say I will track down and kill your murderer.
He's looking out for the next guy.
Yeah,
and that plays for you.
He's paying it forward. I mean, pays enough.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, we can get into it later, like whether or not Batman needs an origin story or not.
Okay.
It's kind of like Iron Man in the way that like he discovered that there was this bad thing,
right?
And then it just changed his heart, and now he's fighting all crime, instead of just like avenging the one thing. And he has the means to do that. Sure, both of them do. Iron Man.
Yeah. No, that makes sense to me too. Yeah, but I just thought I'd ask. Like, I think that is a thing that some people will say is that like it's important that it's never solved because it's the open wound that sort of drives. Yeah.
And I get that.
So is that the whole story?
That is the whole story of Batman number 47.
I can tell you without doing any research that the sort of convoluted like business person thing that's Bill Finger. Do we know who drew it?
I didn't look up any of that stuff.
No worries.
I'm just reading the stories.
Yeah. I can. I got my phone. I will Google things as we go here, and interrupt as I see fit. What was the issue number? Batman
47.
Okay.
All right. So now we're getting back to Detective Comics. We're another 8 years out, roughly 1956. DC 235. Okay. So we've established that Joe Chill killed Thomas and Martha Wayne. Page 3 starts with, but ironically, Joey Chill was shot down by other mobsters who had a grudge against him. Batman reacts to the news. He's dead. His own crimes finally caught up with him. So this is interesting because like that last issue already had Joe Chill die.
Right.
And so now this one, since it's DC, it's not the Batman
Detective Comics. Yeah. It's not Batman series. Yeah.
Yeah, the series.
Periodical. Whatever.
They're changing that history a little bit.
Sure. But I definitely think at this point in time, they're not super concerned with continuity.
No, yeah. I mean, it seems to not be the case.
They don't really care that much.
So Batman, well, I guess I don't remember if it's Batman or if it's Bruce Wayne who reads the news or whatever, but he goes, he's dead. His crime's finally caught up. Kind of like a just desserts, you got what you deserve kind of thing.
So he at this point, he knows that Joe Chill is the one that killed his parents.
Yeah.
But he's not dead.
but he's not dead.
Until he reads the newspaper and finds out he's dead. Okay.
Correct.
Sorry.
Yeah. So Bruce and Dick come across an old Batman costume, never worn by Bruce Wayne. How is this possible? How can there be a Batman costume that Bruce Wayne hasn't ever seen before?
Oh, wow. Is this going to be Thomas?
So with
Holy
that costume,
crap. Wow. So should I interject on how I know this?
Sure. This is probably not what you think.
Okay. Go ahead.
No, go ahead and say what you want.
Well, so there's in recent times, like I think it's a Flashpoint thing.
Flashpoint Paradox, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the movie's called Flashpoint Paradox. The book was just Flashpoint.
Yeah.
But it's a time travel story, and it involves Bruce going back in time. Actually, it involves Barry Allen is the one that goes back in time, and everything's wrong. Barry Allen, the Flash. Sorry, yeah. Everything's all wrong. He doesn't understand why. Man, I'm butchering this. Let me start over. Barry Allen goes back in time and saves his mother from being murdered. That changes history. So he's not actually back in time. He's in the present day, but everything's wrong. And he wants to fix it, and he says, "Who will know how to fix it?" And he goes to Wayne Manor and goes to the Batcave, and he talks to Batman. He says, "Batman, I've screwed up history, but it's not Bruce, it's Thomas." And I want to say there's a scene in that book where, or maybe this is Tom King's Batman run. There's a scene that's exactly what you're describing, where they find a Batman suit, and they find out that it was Thomas. Thomas had dressed up at a party. Yeah. Okay, so that's a callback. Someone went back and read a comic from the 50s, pulled it forward into the 2000s, which happens all the time, by the way. But I didn't know that this was a reference. Mm-hmm. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so there's another story that makes reference to this exact thing.
Okay.
So
okay.
Basically, with that suit, with that Batman costume, they find Thomas Wayne's old diary in a film canister.
Okay.
They watch the film and they read the diary, and basically Thomas Wayne wore the Batman costume only to a masquerade ball.
Okay.
Quote, "And our first prize for the best flying creature costume goes to Dr. Thomas Wayne for his Batman costume."
Right.
So then Bruce thinks that the bat that flew into his room in issue 33 must have, quote, prodded his subconscious memory of his father's costume.
There you go.
Yeah. So then at this point, Thomas Wayne essentially gets kidnapped in the film, taken to a hiding place of a bank robber, Lou Moxon.
Lou Moxon.
Yeah. And so Lou Moxon had his goons go find a doctor to take the bullet out of his arm. And so the very fact that they were like, Dr. Thomas Wayne wins, all these goons were like, a doctor. Lou Moxon had sent the goons to get a doctor to get a bullet out of his arm.
Okay.
So then knowing that Moxon wouldn't let him survive, Thomas Wayne pulls a stunt and he escapes. I'm kind of hand waving, but he pulls a stunt, he gets out. He immediately goes to the police, then Moxon gets arrested. They go through the trial, and Moxon is sentenced to 10 years for armed robbery. And he's really upset. He's like, "You did this to me. I'll get you for this, Wayne. I'll get you." So 10 years pass. Moxon is let free from his sentence, and he confronts Thomas. And we all know all of this because of the diary that Thomas has been writing in. And so he confronts Thomas, quote, "Yeah, I served my 10 years in jail where you put me. I swore I'd get you, and I will. But I'm too smart to do it myself. The police would arrest me on suspicion fast. I'll get someone else to do it for me," end quote. Then the diary ends.
Okay.
So Bruce and Dick realize that Joe Chill had been paid to kill Thomas and Martha, and Lou Moxon is the responsible party for their deaths.
Wow.
And Bruce had been spared so that he could testify that it was a robber and not Moxon.
And he doesn't remember this?
Yeah.
Okay. This is a pretty serious retcon.
Yeah. I mean, it's the third origin story, and everyone has brought something really significant to the context.
For sure, but I feel like the second origin story that you told me didn't really change the first one in a meaningful way. It just brought extra color. This is one where it's actually what you thought happened didn't. It happened, but there were other inciting incidents or
more context.
Yeah.
Don't tell me what happened because I didn't write any of that down. I can pull open the comic.
No, that's okay. What was the issue number?
It was 235 DC
235. I'm gonna look this up.
Okay.
Because it's really fascinating. Because for whatever reason, this issue, maybe a bunch of writers, in the 90s and 2000s read this issue and remembered it or something or probably what's going to happen is we're going to keep going and people are going to keep calling back to it over the years. But there's lore in there that I kind of know that I didn't think was that old. I didn't think it went back to the 50s because, Thomas Wayne wearing the Batman costume is something that I know. It's not Lou Moxon, but there are other stories that involve, in fact, The Long Halloween involves a story where, Thomas Wayne is responsible for fixing up Carmine Falcone, right? For having to save the life of a gangster and having the sort of like fallout of that be a driver of the story. There's elements here that I'm surprised to see. I expect the 50s to be, gigantic pennies and, going to the department store and like the sports department and Robin's like shooting bombs and like, I don't expect sort of deeper threads of the lore here, which is stupid. I probably should. This is why we're doing the show, because there's a lot of for me this Golden and Silver Age stuff. I'm like, it's not very good, but fascinating. Okay,
yeah.
Bill Finger, Shelley Moldoff, and Joe Serta. I've never heard of Joe Serta. He was a penciler on this issue, but Bill Finger and Shelley Moldoff.
I'm gonna give like a real fast TLDR on like what happens for the rest of it.
Sounds good.
So essentially, Batman confronts him, and Moxon is like, "I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. Who is Thomas Wayne?"
Okay.
And essentially, what they discover is that at some point he hits his head and he gets that Lou Moxon has amnesia of this crime.
Yeah.
And so it's after his jail sentence. So after he paid Joe Chill to kill Thomas and Martha Wayne, he hit his head. He forgot that it happened.
Okay.
But still, like, was it old habits die hard? He's still a criminal.
Right.
And Batman is following him to catch him for crimes in general, and is in this situation where he puts on the old Batman costume, Thomas Wayne's Batman costume from the Masquerade.
Yeah.
And the dude recognizes him. It breaks his amnesia.
Okay.
And then they're able to take him down for it.
Oh, what a silly story.
Yeah, it's silly for sure. I'm glad I looked that up because I'm just shocked I didn't finish writing all that down.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, so we're making a bigger jump. We're going from 1956 to 1985.
1985.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And this is a TV show.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
What was on TV in 1985?
Superpowers Team Galactic Guardians.
What? I've never heard of this.
So I have a short clip for you to watch, and I want you to tell me.
Oh my gosh, I'm excited.
Okay.
Darkseid, Superman. The Joker and Darkseid are together for some reason. Wonder Woman, Lex Luthor, Cyborg. Robin. I don't know all their names. We got a bunch of new gods. Wow, Hawkman, The Flash. Who's this guy on the far right? We got Green Lantern. Mm-hmm. Wow, Aquaman's in there.
So I'm going to jump ahead.
The Superpowers team. Why didn't they call this the Justice League?
You don't know how, Ruff.
Hey, Scarecrow.
What the? Chameleons?
This voice acting is bad.
Color.
No fear toxin. He's got a magic skull. It's cool, though. There's these little lizards, and they've turned into, Komodo dragons, kind of. There's these gigantic...
Okay, so I want to jump forward.
Okay. Is that Adam West? Wow. Adam West is voicing this. That's awesome. That's not Burt Ward, though.
Steady, Robin. It's just an agoraphobic illusion.
Acrophobic.
Magnify your fear of heights. You've got to close your mind to it.
This is the best. How did I not know this was a thing?
Stop him.
Okay, we'll stop.
Is he gonna have the fear happen to him, and it's gonna be his? Okay, Brian, you've gone deep. I think you've gone deeper than maybe you needed to. Holy crap!
Yeah. When we first talked about this, and you could not believe some of the stuff I dug up, I knew I'd gotten to do. This script is 17 pages long.
Oh yeah. So we're gonna be doing this in a few parts.
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, what's the animation style for you?
Hanna-Barbera.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what I wrote was animation style and cadence is classic Scooby-Doo.
It is. Yeah.
I mean, even some of the like Robin, I wouldn't be surprised if he said zoinks. You know, he's totally like.
Well, did you watch any of the other Hanna-Barbera stuff? Like, have you ever seen like Johnny Quest or like It's very in that vein.
Oh, for sure. But like the
Space
the way that
Ghost
they
and-
move and the animation style and the way that they talk,
Right.
The like unnatural jerkiness or whatever, it really struck me as like that classic Scooby-Doo style.
Yeah.
And then it's voiced by Adam West.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I knew he did a bunch of. They had a Batman cartoon in the 70s that was just Batman, but I didn't know he was in sort of a team up television. I didn't know the TV team up television show existed. That's wild.
So Batman's chasing after the Scarecrow, and in this variation, the Scarecrow frightens people through some kind of sonic hypnosis ray. Exactly.
It makes like a radar sound almost.
Instead of a fear toxin. And I don't know if this is pre-fear toxin or what, because I don't know all that
I don't know
history.
either.
But Batman's chasing Scarecrow into an alley. He says, "Give up, Scarecrow. You're coming with this place." Scarecrow is surprised. He's afraid. And he runs away laughing. Okay, so this is the very end of this episode. Famous. I'm sure you've seen this before. You've seen this, right?
Yeah, I think I've seen GIFs of it.
Yeah. Okay, that's the end of that. Just then, Robin swings in and witnesses Batman start to cry in the rain before running away. To me, this is a really famous meme of Batman, but I've only seen it like a few times out in the wild.
Same. Like I had no idea that this is what this was from. And honestly, if you had asked me without prompting me with the image beforehand and said, "Do I know this meme?" I would have said no. But like, it definitely jogs the memory seeing it.
So the story goes on explaining that Batman and Bruce Wayne haven't been the same since they are they individuals? Are they the same? Whatever.
Sure.
Visited Crime Alley.
So is this the first time that's called Crime Alley? Is this stupid television show? You're shitting me.
As far as I can find, that's
oh
the
my
first
god!
Crime Alley,
I'm gonna have to look that up. I don't believe you. That's crazy.
So Robin brings it up to the Justice League, except it's not the Justice League; it's whatever this TV show is called. And they also don't have a clue. So then Dick Grayson talks to Alfred at some party, and he references Crime Alley. Alfred is shocked. He drops his cup of tea, and then Bruce overhears the conversation. He decides to take Dick/Robin and oddly Wonder Woman, Diana's there, down to the Batcave and tell them. So flashback, it wasn't always called Crime Alley, you know. A man, a woman, a child leave a showing of Robin Hood together. So notice all the different, you're going to hear a bunch of different shows that they were watching. So in some versions, it's the Mark of Zorro. Here it's Robin Hood.
Interesting.
They leave Robin Hood together. It doesn't say who they are, but like we know who they are. They take a shortcut through an alley. A robber shows up and wants Martha's purse. The man...
Time out real quick. Sorry if you don't mind.
Do it.
So in the previous 3, were they leaving a movie?
The first one... Yeah, they were walking home from a movie.
Good.
Yeah,
I thought you were getting ready to blow my mind that the stupid television show from the 80s was the first time they were walking home from a movie.
No.
My whole world's turned upside down. I'm questioning everything.
This is the first one where they actually give the title of what they had watched.
Okay, gotcha.
All right. So yeah, robber shows up and he wants Martha's purse. The man, Thomas, jumps in the way to protect his wife. A flash of lightning masks the sound of a gunshot. The robber runs away without the purse. I think there was like a little clever writing thing where they showed that it was all for naught, that they just shot his parents and left without the loot he was going for. And so I found myself alone in the world, a boy who secretly screamed for justice. From that day forward, I vowed to avenge my parents' fate by devoting my life to fighting crime. End quote. And essentially tells the story that we already know, including the whole criminals are a cowardly lot, the bat flying around the study to inspire his symbol. Quote, then I became Batman, the man with no fear except for one. The fear of the place where I lost the two people that I loved most, and I hadn't been back since that terrible night. End quote. So then Batman commits to visit Crime Alley, conquers fear of that place, and you'll have to watch the episode to hear what happens next.
You're gonna leave me on a cliffhanger like that.
Yeah.
But Scarecrow.
Yeah, I've got all the links in there.
No worries. It's good. Yeah, well, it's on YouTube. We'll put a link in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Give me 2 seconds here.
Sure.
Before we move on, because I've got to figure out if Crime Alley comes from this stupid. I'm googling it, but I'm very slow with one hand. Detective 457. This says.
What year is Detective 457?
Let me get up. Detective 457. March 1976. This is definitely Neil Adams on the cover.
Okay.
There is no hope in Crime Alley is the name of the story. Every night on the same date, Batman abandons all other crimes and missions and secretly heads to visit Leslie Tompkins in Park Row, better known as Crime Alley. So this is the first appearance of Leslie Tompkins, which is cool. Are you familiar with her? She's an important character. She's a doctor. She fixes up Batman and the kids and, criminals that... And she's kind of his better angel, right? Like if Alfred is... This was one sort of... encouraging him, then Leslie Tompkins is the one that's saying like maybe you shouldn't be using violence, right?
So the angel and the devil, on the shoulder thing. Yeah,
she sticks around well into the 90s. So it sounds like they don't retell the story, but they do reference back to it. Detective Comics 457 in the 70s, name of Crime Alley. I was gonna be mind blown if that cartoon was the first time. That's crazy though. Very cool. Thank you for that was a good one.
So then we're going to get into some of the deeper stories now, which I think are pretty interesting. Batman Year One. This one's not really worth mentioning. I've got several that I have titled not worth mentioning.
What do you mean it's not worth mentioning?
As far as the origin story goes.
This is, time out, pause.
Yeah.
This is an incredibly important story for the record.
Definitely. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
It's just, as far as specifically focusing on the origin story of Batman, it doesn't have much.
Right. So if I recall correctly, the story begins with Batman, with Bruce returning from his training. He's coming back to Gotham. And I do believe we see him don the uniform for the first time in the story.
Yes.
Yeah. But you're right. There's no parents dying, is there?
So there's a extremely short flashback that tells you everything that we've already talked about.
Yeah.
Except that I guess this might be the first time that you see the bat crash through the window of the study.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, so the only variation to this familiar story
is
that this time the bat crashes through the window of the study and lands on the bust of Thomas Wayne, which inspires Bruce to become Batman. So this particular piece will keep coming around, but that's the only thing it adds. Otherwise, it's just like a really short flashback.
Yeah, and if you are looking for where to start reading Batman, if you've never read comics before, people always give you this story. And there's a few reasons for that. One is that it's good. Another reason is that this is the first time we're dealing with anything that sort of resembles a Batman origin post-Crisis. Are you familiar with Crisis on Infinite Earths? Well, we're going to be here all day if I talk about Crisis on Infinite Earths too much. But suffice to say that this is very shortly after the first reboot of DC Comics. So they've started over. The idea is that you throw everything away. None of it happened. And we're going to get a bunch of new authors to come in and sort of tell the story for the first time, all those sorts of things. Year One is not the very first issue after Crisis. There's, I think it might be a year or two, but they bring in Frank Miller, who's a hotshot, had a really big run on Daredevil to write this story. And so not only is this just a good story, right, but he's going back and by acknowledging all of those things that happened, he's saying, yes, they did happen, right? So he's solidifying the Batman origin that we know and love.
So this isn't like Batman related, but this sounds a lot like Star Wars to me, where Disney purchased Star Wars and then they said all of the extended universe is no longer canon.
Basically, yeah.
And then Dave Filoni has had these like kids TV shows where he's been like cherry picking these.
A bunch of authors came back and brought like they got who was the guy that wrote the Thrawn books? Timothy Zahn. Yeah, came back and wrote new Zahn books that are basically like, well, all the stuff you care about still here.
Yeah.
And that's what Frank Miller is doing, is saying, Batman's origin didn't change in a big way. Definitely read this book. It's well worth reading.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There's also a movie that I talk about later. It basically covers the same stuff, but like, yeah.
And this is in the Batman series. Worth noting, people call it Batman Year One. If you go to Barnes and Noble or whatever, you can buy a hardcover or a soft cover. There's a million printings of it, but I believe they're numbered issues. It's like Batman number 500 whatever.
It would definitely be before 430.
Sure, there you go. Or it could be Detective Comics. I don't know. I believe though the sort of like this is just an arc. They didn't. This is not before the graphic novel, but it's before it's super popular. So
got it. Okay, so then next one, 1989, Batman number 430. This is another familiar flashback story. There are a few notable differences. The story shows a young Bruce trying to play catch with his very stressed out father. So at this point, like Thomas Wayne is a millionaire or whatever. He has a lot of money. He's feeling a lot of stress because of something with the economy and whether or not his money is going to like turn out the way he wants. So maybe this is like a reference to like the classic like 80s dad, but he loses patience and he strikes Bruce and he said, he's just angry, angry dad does a bad thing. And then Bruce says, "I hate him. I wish he were dead." And he leaves. It's like, whoa, right? Not a good omen for where we know these stories are headed.
This is some Peter Parker Uncle Ben energy.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
So Thomas feels terrible. He later finds the right words to apologize, and he earns Bruce's forgiveness. And then to make up for him smacking him around, they go to a movie, Zorro.
Okay, this is the first time it's Zorro.
Yeah, as far as I can tell. So then, flash forward, they're walking home. Thomas gets shot. Martha dies of shock.
Okay.
Same story, second verse.
Yeah, very very similar.
Yeah.
And that issue is Jim Starlin, Jim Aparo.
Sounds right to me.
Yeah, Jim Starlin of Thanos fame. The man who created Thanos. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, 1989. So I've got 3 that came out the same year, all 1989.
It would be interesting to know what time of year these happened. I assume these are all probably written before the movie.
So Batman 430, I don't know, but I have a note that the other ones, the original series launched in 1989 as the third major monthly Batman title following the popularity of Tim Burton's 1989 film Batman.
So Legends of the Dark Knight is launching after the movie. But the way comic books are written and published and all that kind of stuff, it's likely that some of these things were written before the movie even came out or were happening very, very shortly after.
Or maybe they were connected to the writers of the movie.
And stuff like that, yeah.
Yeah. So then this one's called Shaman. It's the Legends of the Dark Knight Shaman.
This is one I've heard of before, but I've never read it.
This one's actually really good. These next couple I did enjoy reading quite a bit. They were long, though. It wasn't like a couple of pages. It was like an entire issue.
This is like a graphic novel, yeah.
For the origin. So the issue kicks off amid action. Bruce Wayne is climbing an icy cliff with a guy named Doggett. We don't know who this person is. They're tracking a killer, and the weather is turning sour. Icy and stuff. Bruce was told that Doggett is the best bounty hunter and tracker in Alaska. This seems like the first job that they would have worked on together, and Bruce is trying to learn from Doggett. So they reach the top of this cliff that they're climbing, and there's a cave opening, and then a gunshot rings out, and Doggett is hit squarely in the head, and he dies. So their quarry, Thomas Woodley, is on the cliffs above them. Bruce runs into the cave. Woodley shouts out, revealing that he knows both of their names. He knows Doggett, he knows Bruce, and that this is going to be an easy kill because he took down Doggett, who he thought was the real concern, and now he just got like some city slicker he's going after. There's also Thomas Wayne that shows up very prominently in this episode. So to avoid confusion, I'll be calling this dude by his surname, Woodley.
Okay.
Not Thomas.
Okay.
It's Thomas Woodley.
Very good.
It's just a note. So apparently Woodley knows a lot. Bruce is a city boy who paid Doggett to follow him, and that Bruce refused to carry a gun. These are all very important tidbits of information for the person you're trying to kill at this point. So Woodley sneaks up on Bruce, but it's just Bruce's parka and pack propped up to look like him. It's a clever trap. It's a ruse. Bruce jumps out and attacks Woodley. They tussle. Woodley ends up falling over the cliff with Bruce's parka and pack. Quote, "I didn't mean for him to die," end quote. The dire circumstances settle in on Bruce. He took my pack and my parka with him. It's cold, probably 30 below, 50 with the wind chill. I have no food, no matches, no radio or flares, very little clothing. I'm somewhere in North Alaska. The nearest village is a day's trek away. The storm will hit soon. Plus, he doesn't have the gear to climb down and get his supplies back.
Mm-hmm.
So they've cleaned up the story around like how he's just completely screwed.
Sure.
He passes out in the snow. He dreams of a snow monster shooting his parents, who are ice sculptures that shatter. It's clearly a hallucination or fever dream or something. He wakes up with some people standing over him. A man in a mask that makes him look like a giant bat. The Shaman.
Okay.
From the title.
Interesting.
And then he tells him a tale of healing. So I'm going to paraphrase this. Basically, there's a raven that's going to die. To save him, the bat stretches its fingers into wings to fan air over the raven and blow the sickness away. Mm-hmm. This is an Alaskan native story. It worked, and the raven let the bat keep his new form, having wings. You alone of all the ground animals will be able to fly. So he recovers. They ask him not to tell the story to anyone else, and they believe that the story itself is critical to the healing process and that he's the first outsider to hear it. So again, like the interesting thing here is it's kind of like retconning his inspiration to become Batman.
Right.
Like this bat thing.
Well, we pointed out how it was kind of stupid. Like they just chose a bat because it's scary.
Yeah.
Right. And instead now there's this Alaskan shaman who's imparting upon him this parable of the bat, and he thinks it's profound. I assume.
And this is like a contentious thing because some people would argue it's more or less stupid than the original story.
Oh, less stupid for sure.
Some people would argue the other way. I think the arguments I've read are basically like, if they wanted to retcon it, couldn't they come up with something better?
Well,
but they probably could have.
Sure.
And we'll talk about some other options. But yeah, so that's like one of the really interesting pieces of this whole like shaman story.
Yeah.
Is they've changed where he got the inspiration to be a bat.
Yeah.
As Batman.
This one was written by Denny O'Neil.
I don't know who that is.
He's a writer that was writing Batman in the 80s and 90s. He kind of ran, if I am correct, this could be wrong, maybe I'll edit it out when we find out how wrong I am. He was the editor for the Batman office for a while. So
that's cool.
A lot of the big events from the 90s, Cataclysm, No Man's Land, Nightfall, he kind of was the ringleader that was guiding all the writers in the right direction. So, it makes sense that he was writing sort of like foundational lore material for Batman.
It also is a story that kind of like puts Bruce up on the pedestal as like the first outsider to hear this ancient story or whatever, which is like a kind of a recurring thing where they try and like have Bruce Wayne stand out among mere mortals or whatever. Sure. To set him up to be
there's a tendency amongst superhero writers to try to take things that happen by chance and turn them into some sort of predestination.
Yeah.
J. Michael Straczynski, who is the creator of Babylon 5, wrote all of the episodes of Babylon 5, wrote Spider-Man in the 2000s for a while and came up with this idea of like the spider totem, right? And there was this sort of like supernatural, element where he's, Peter Parker has been preordained to be the Spider-Man. This is not quite that. There's the trying to take it and give it a little more.
There will be.
Okay, fair enough. This is me shutting up. I'm listening to the rest of the story.
So Bruce returns to Wayne Manor. He's reading books that he had sent himself. Quote, "A treatise on the criminal mind" by Sir Maxwell Floppy.
Floppy.
I know it's a terrible name, but like they're giving deeper background to where some of these different older quotes came from. So the whole like the criminals are a cowardly and superstitious lot. came from this book. It's just now
Okay.
we know the title of the book and that it was a book that he found while he was out on his different learning missions or whatever, and he sent it to himself.
Okay.
So where before it was just like a thing that he said back in the
Sure.
1939 comic. He read that, making the connection to the earlier stories. In those stories, year one specifically, a bat broke through the window.
Right.
It's a bit of foreshadowing, but we're not there yet. So not yet Batman. Bruce goes out crime fighting. He's only wearing some kind of like army surplus jacket with a beanie. I mean, he looks like another criminal.
Yeah.
And while he's out, he fights a pimp on their turf. Then he decks a tough hooker named Selena Kyle. These are quotes. Now we would say sex worker. He gets shot by the police, and then he wrecks their car in his attempt to escape, which is kind of a bad night for crime fighting.
All of this happens in year one, by the way.
This happens in the movie. Does this part happen in the comic too?
I believe so.
Okay.
I could be wrong.
So I know that a lot of these like build off of each other.
Sure.
He gets home, he's bleeding everywhere. He sits in the study, pulls up the book again, A Treatise on the Criminal Mind. He rereads the passage, criminals are a cowardly and superstitious lot. Crash! At that second, the bat that we all should be expecting by now breaks through the window. Bruce is reminded of the shaman with the bat mask, and he says, I shall become a bat.
There you go.
And that's essentially like where that issue ends. The next thing you see is he's like putting on the cape and stuff. Interesting note, which you already said, this storyline is relevant for introducing the first origin of the Batcave on the post-crisis continuity.
Okay. There you go. Makes sense.
I have that linked too. I tried to link everything I did in this so that you can decide what you want to put in the show notes and stuff.
I mean, Denny O'Neil here is reintroducing the Batcave. He's not inventing the Batcave. Batcave exists pre-crisis, but post-crisis this is. Makes sense. I have never read Shaman. This feels like something I need to read.
It's a good one.
I really like Dennis O'Neil, so.
I think this next one I liked more.
Okay.
It's called The Man Who Falls, also 1989.
Is this from Legends of the Dark Knight as well?
So it says, The Man Who Falls uses parts of Year One, Blind Justice, and the first arc of Legends of the Dark Knight Shaman as part of the story. All these make up the training and first months of Batman's career. So this was written by
Denny O'Neil,
who... and I did catch the names that pulled over from Shaman to this one because there is a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
And the idea with this was that they were taking all those stories and combining them into a little bit more of a succinct origin story.
Yes. So the title, the book was called Secret Origins, was the name of the book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the storyline would have appeared in that. And I'm assuming that if you were picking up Secret Origins every month when it came out, you were getting different origin stories for probably post-crisis, right? This is the series that they're telling people to go do. If you're not reading, the Green Lantern book, you pick up the Secret Origins, it's going to give you the Cliff Notes. I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't read all of those.
Sure. Fair enough.
So this is the first story I read that included the cave when Bruce is young. So this is the one that, like, I think if you've seen the movies, you should
Batman
be
Begins.
familiar with.
Yeah.
So before that even.
You reminded me of this the other
Batman
day.
Forever.
I had forgotten that
Yeah.
that the cave, he falls into the cave in Batman Forever.
So this issue kicks off with Bruce falling through a boarded up patch in the Wayne Manor's lawn.
Right.
He falls into a cave, bats swarm. Thomas jumps down and carries Batman out. Version has a bit of tough love from Thomas saying, "Idiot, I told you never go off alone. Didn't I? Martha says, "Thomas, he's frightened." Thomas responds, "He damn well ought to be.
Wow.
He could have been killed. He's got to learn." And then he kind of walks off brooding.
Coming off hot, yeah.
Yeah. This is another one of those like 80s dad things.
Sure.
The story soon jumps to a flashback with no words of his parents, each being shot by a robber. It states that Bruce was only 8 years old when they were murdered. So now, this is, as far as I know, this is the first time they say how old he was when this happened, which I am doubtful of because it's the 80s. It seems like a lot of time has passed for them to state that. But in my notes, that's the first time I noticed they said he was 8.
It's hard to say. It certainly would not surprise me at all if it's the first time they say it post-crisis.
Sure.
But
the story goes on to show him going through college. this is all like montagey, bouncing through classes and schools. Professors comment that he has never picked a major, and his friends show frustration when Bruce leaves them behind. Quote, and the ache he felt seemed to fill his entire being. He learned to ignore the ache and the pain of loss and isolation. They were the conditions of his life, and he accepted them, end quote. So he's kind of like hardening himself to become a crime fighter and not like have attachments and stuff. So at 20, he moves to Washington, D.C., although it says the nation's capital. I assume that's Washington, D.C. And
In the DC universe, I have no idea.
Yeah,
I would assume.
I would assume so too. That's why I wrote that in. But it says the nation's capital.
In the DC universe, there are these imaginary cities like Gotham and Metropolis, but the real cities
also exist.
Yeah, there's a famous period in which the Justice League is based out of Detroit, which would have been happening before this. That was a Bronze Age
Got
thing.
it.
So I assume Washington D.C. is. Yeah.
So he met with the FBI's recruiting officer and joins the FBI training. It says this, he stayed in it for exactly 6 weeks. During that time, he learned much about writing reports, obeying regulations, analyzing statistics, and dressing neatly, and nothing else. The experience confirmed a suspicion he long had. He could not operate within a system, end quote. Then he left for Korea. So an interesting aside, like Batman Begins, you can see like Christopher Nolan rips off of this for sure.
Sure.
And in my research, I learned that where he went was also Korea. I didn't know that.
Yeah, to me, you mean when he goes to the mountains to see the League of Shadows?
Yeah.
I always read that as Tibet. I always thought he was going to like Everest or something like that.
Yeah, when I was looking through it, it says Korea in the sources I found.
Sure.
Which blew my mind. But again, it's just like some snowy mountainy place.
Right.
Shrug. So here's a quoted section that I think is all interesting. It wasn't easy to find the temple high in the Paektusan Mountains.
Yeah, Paektu Sun Mountains.
Okay.
Something like that.
It took him 6 weeks and $40,000 in bribes, and this is 1980s money.
Yeah.
But finally, he stood in front of the massive door. His knock wasn't answered. He had been told it wouldn't be, but his informant had given him the secret sequence of rotating knobs to enter. So he entered and sensed the presence of another, but no one responded to his shouts. Again, it was as he expected. He waited for 3 weeks. And then, at this point, Master Kirigi shows up and starts doling out chores like, what was it, like sweeping and then washing the dishes and then making rice. He does this for like a stupid amount of time. And he did these variations of chores for a few months before...
What year is Karate Kid? I'm going to look that up.
Yeah.
Because this seems like the pretty standard sort of like...
wax on, wax off thing.
Yeah, the Asian mysticism, you know. Yeah. Trope.
Right. He did that for a few months before he began actual martial arts training. He was there for about a year. Master Kirigi gives him this warning. He does kind of like bolster him up. He's like, oh, you have impeccable speed and reflexes. Your eyesight's incredible. You're smart. Like he just kind of lays out how he essentially has these like superhuman while being mortal abilities, right? So I'm just kind of like
You're an
rolling
exceptional specimen.
yeah, exactly. But he gives him this warning. Some great violence has marked you. It gives you your genius for combat technique. Unless you are very lucky, it will destroy you. But I can take you past it to what lies on the other side. I will require another 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Obviously, Bruce is like, no, that's not going to work. I'm really flighty.
Sure.
And the next day, he leaves.
Okay.
He heads for France, where he worked with some kind of bounty hunter. The man's poor morals drove Bruce onto his next series of apprenticeships, which is my term, working with all but the greatest detective in the world, Willie Doggett. So naturally, that's where he goes next. This is going to reference back to the Shaman, but he was climbing in the mountains with Doggett.
Okay,
This is where Shaman starts. Tracking another bad dude. Doggett dies. Bruce fights off the other dude. Falls into an ice crevice. Bruce loses his supplies, his pack, parka, everything you need to survive in the lethal cold. This is kind of an old story now. He passes out, wakes up to an Indian shaman again, who's wearing a mask. The shaman brings him back to health, and he tells him, "You have the mark in your eyes, the mark of the bat." So now he's telling him he's got the mark of the bat, like you were saying.
Right,
Spider-Man has the mark of the spider, or whatever.
Yes.
Right.
A little bit of mysticism here.
Mysticism
He's preordained.
here.
Yeah.
Preordained, absolutely.
Which, like, for a lot of people, this sort of thing pisses them off, right? Because the whole point is that Batman is someone that, like,
he's an everyman, right?
well, he's driven by circumstance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Bruce finally returns to Wayne Manor. It shows him fighting crime in civilian clothes, losing, just like in the Shaman episode or issue. He's humiliated and sits in the study reading a book. It says criminals are a cowardly and superstitious lot. And then right then, Bat crashes through the window. Bruce gets the message he's been looking for. And the next page, he's putting on the bat suit. And the issue 1 of that series ends.
Okay.
So it's the whole.
So that was
issue.
all one issue.
Yeah.
22 pages. I looked it up earlier. The Batman Shaman story is actually 5 issues. So that's a whole arc. That's like a trade paperback. They cover a lot. There's a series that's going on right now. It might have ended at this point, but it was going on this year, called Batman the Knight, written by Chip Zdarsky, who is actually the writer now of the main Batman book, that's covering this same content, which is interesting because I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, not as well versed in this as I should be, but I feel like that it's a really interesting period of, like, Batman is, like, honing his body and training himself and stuff like that is not covered that often. A lot of times it's, they say that he does that. He goes off around the world and, like, collects different abilities and like apprentices under different people, but we don't see it. So it sounds like 22 pages here. We don't see a lot of it either, but, like, we get a couple. He goes to Korea, gets the sort of, like, martial arts training, goes to France, gets the sort of, like, training.
Detective.
Yes, exactly. So getting a little window into that.
Mm-hmm. This is also kind of interesting, like, looking back to some of the other stuff we've covered. We watched that 1944 Batman.
The Batman series. We haven't recorded an episode about it
No.
yet. Yeah, I think it's 43 is the one you watched.
Okay. And so when my wife and I were watching it, we were like, wow, he is such a wuss. Like, he's just like some rich, soft dude wearing a bat suit and
He's a
getting
fop.
the snot beaten out of him.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes sense because, like, this whole concept of Batman that we have grown up with as this, like, toned and like...
he's perfected his
learned,
body.
Yeah, exactly. Came much later. So that wasn't part of, like, the original.
It would make sense, right? That, if you were born with a silver spoon, you wouldn't be a badass, right? At least stereotypically. So.
Yeah.
It's cool that that Denny O'Neil goes to great care to, like, tie his 2 Batman origin story books, both Shaman and what was the name of this one?
The Man Who Falls.
Yeah, The Man Who Falls and Shaman. He ties it back into Batman Year One. It's something that was really cool about the Crisis on Infinite Earths reboot, is that they really were trying to make it all make sense together.
Did you want to describe this mask at all?
Oh, the Batman mask?
No, this is the
the Shaman's
mask.
Bat mask. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. So there's sort of 2 colors that are going on. There's sort of the upper half, where you've got both the ears and sort of the forehead coming down to in a V to where the nose starts, all the way to sort of the upper half of the cheek is blue. Right. And then the rest of the mask is kind of a brown. So you've got what looks like straw, maybe like a straw mask, where you've got sort of a mane coming out of the top of straw and like a beard of straw coming out the bottom. And then the mouth is all kind of brown as well. And the mouth has these really sharp teeth. There are 12 teeth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 12. 16 teeth. Sorry, there are more teeth on bottom than top, but they look like they would really, they're like knives more than teeth. They would stab you. Like there's no molars or anything going on in there. And then it's got, the sort of upturned nose like a bat would have, where the nostrils are facing you, and these triangles for eyes that are white with a red dot in the center. It looks freaky. Like, it's a mask that definitely you would expect to be it was created by First Peoples or Native Americans to scare the bejesus out of you. Yeah.
Now, can you make a comparison to the Batman mask, the cowl?
Oh, yes. I see what they're doing now. I spent all this time describing how the top half was blue and the bottom half was brown and not even thinking about that. Yeah, of course. It's exactly the same as the cowl is, right? There's the mouth cut out that is not blue, and then the rest is blue. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the shape of the eyes is that like triangle, like squinty,
yeah,
evil / anger eye that like Batman has. It's all white,
right? But it's not too different than the Bob Kane eyes.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. Yeah, we've taken the jolly Batman, from the Silver Age, and we've tweaked him just a little bit, and he's really scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also reminiscent of when this happens in a couple of instances. This happens in Batman the Animated Series before it happens in Batman Begins, but when Batman uses the fear toxin against Scarecrow,
sure. Yeah, I remember
what
that.
Batman looks like to Scarecrow.
Yeah.
This is reminiscent of that. It's just like one scary MF.
I'll drop the picture in the chapter artwork.
Sweet. Okay, so this is the Batman, the movie, the Tim Burton movie, and this takes place before those comics do, but I put it last because it's kind of like the least interesting of them.
You mean like it was released in 1989 before the comics were?
Correct. Those comics were, there was a groundswell after the movie came out.
Sure,
of people
sure.
purchasing those comics.
Gotcha.
Do you want to watch this clip together? It's pretty short.
Sure. Yeah. I've probably seen this a dozen times before, but so we got the newspaper. He's looking at the newspaper as the prompt to the, and then we go back. We go back. We go back. He takes off his glasses.
Mm-hmm.
He broods. He furrows his brow.
It's interesting to me with this like really deep focus on the origin story.
Yeah.
What I notice now that I never noticed in the movies before.
It's the Monarch Theater.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the doorman. Everyone's walking out. Bruce is walking in the middle of the two kids. Mom leans over to talk to him. He puts on his hat. He's got a bag of popcorn. We didn't see what movie they were watching, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It looks like it's just rained. The pavement is wet. There's people walking up behind them. Two guys. Oh, no. Those were just people walking on the street.
Or maybe they were setting a trap.
Bruce is very happy. There are two people. Oh, it's just one guy. What the heck? There are two people. It's funny. I don't think that guy looks like Jack Nicholson at all.
I don't think so either.
Does he have any relation? Do you know who that guy is?
I don't have any idea who it is.
You ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight? What the does that mean, by the way?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just supposed to be like the scary thing that like a crazy
spooky.
person says.
Sure.
So I will say that like I watch movies and I just like take them for what they are. I don't really spend much time like trying to dive into the details.
Sure.
And the
You're
writing
not
on this
dissecting.
is much better than I had really given it credit for.
Sure.
Because of some of the like little micro events that happen. I'll
Do
explain them.
tell. Do tell.
So just to walk through what happened with everyone else. So Bruce is in the Batcave reviewing footage from the Joker's TV broadcast, trying to figure out who that person is. He's sitting at the Bat computer. He pulls out an old book, revealing a newspaper with the headline, Thomas Wayne murdered, prominent doctor and wife slain in robbery. So what's interesting to me that I'd really never connected before, was it wasn't that it reminded him of a thing that happened before. He recognized that guy in the TV.
Right.
And that's what reminded him, and he pulled out this old thing. And so now you're going through this like flashback.
Sure.
Flashes back, they left the movie, they're walking home. It shows that they're being followed. And it is kind of confusing because there's like two guys walking a few paces behind them, and then they disappear.
Right.
And then one guy shows up, and then another guy shows up from a different angle.
You do see two shadows at one point, When Bruce first turns around and he's looking down the alley, you see two shadows. I was confused though.
Yeah, it's a little bit confusing, especially like the cadence of the slow-mo and then like catching up to speed and the lighting and stuff. So when they enter an alleyway, they look back and there's a man silhouetted by a street light.
Yeah.
Another man steps forward and reaches for Martha's pearl necklace. Thomas reaches over and tries to stop the robber. Then the silhouetted man pulls out a revolver and shoots Thomas Wayne, then quickly shoots again, hitting Martha. They fall to the ground. So what's interesting here to me is that the robber holding the pearls in his hands stands stunned.
Yeah,
Like
he didn't
expect his buddy to be a murderer.
Actually shoot, yeah.
Right? Bruce is also in shock. So the silhouetted man says, "Tell me, kid, you ever danced with the devil by the pale moonlight?" Which again, like, what
is it
that?
in the pale moonlight or by the pale moonlight?
You can go back and I think it's by the pale moonlight.
You're probably right. I always thought it was in, but that's I am your father sort of thing.
So then he points the gun at Bruce, clearly intimating that he's going to kill this child as well, which like shows he's even more of a cold-blooded killer than just like killing a couple of adults.
But is he just trying to scare the piss out of him, or is he actually going to do it?
Well, it looks like he's going to kill him. I mean, it looks like he's got murder in his eyes.
Sure.
And then when the dude calls to him, so the man steps into the light. You see this big toothy grin. He cocks the gun. "Man, let's go!" shouts the first robber.
Yeah.
"Let's go, Jack!" And that like seems to like break his trance. And then he turns and he says, "See you around, kid," and he leaves. Flashback ends. Bruce is staring at the wide grin of the Joker on the screen.
Yeah.
So one of the other things that I think is interesting here is it retcons who kills.
Yeah, it's not Joe Chill.
It's not Joe Chill.
And it's not nobody.
It's not nobody. It's the guy that becomes the Joker.
Right.
So essentially they're saying it kind of a more insidious backstory is that a further reason to hate the Joker for Batman as like a driving force was that he's also the dude that killed his parents.
Right. And it sets up this duality, right, of Joker being the yin to Batman's yang, which like I think a lot of people now, because of this movie, feel that way, that like Joker is the Batman villain, but isn't necessarily viewed that way before this movie.
Yeah. Well, and then there's also the whole thing of like Batman could be the Joker because he's obviously crazy.
Sure.
He's just aiming his stuff on the side of justice.
Sure.
Right. Another thing I think is interesting with the whole Batman doesn't kill thing is all the times he's with the Joker and has an opportunity to kill him and chooses not to. Right. Which is overcoming his like kind of innate sense to get vengeance for the guy who killed his parents, you know.
Sure, I think I see what they're doing and I appreciate it. I think to me the duality of Batman and Catwoman is more compelling as they're sort of opposite sides of the same coin than Joker being an opposite to Batman. But
yeah. My personal take is I don't like this.
Me neither.
I prefer
I'm
the
glad
idea
because I thought maybe you were gonna come out for it.
No. I prefer the idea that the Joker is just some total rando.
Yeah,
and that the people who killed Thomas and Martha would be like old as heck because they'd be their age, you know. But let me jump to the last question so we can kind of get that in because I think like the best stories we've covered. Okay. The other stuff is interesting, but I feel like the foundational origin stories we've hit today.
Yeah, and I think we should do a round two.
I think we need to because there's more interesting stuff there.
And I tell you what, before we do the next time, I'll go back and read some of these.
Okay.
Because now I got to read Batman Shaman. that sounds really up my alley.
Okay, so question: do you think that they should continue telling Batman's origin story? Do you think he needs an origin story?
So, do I think they should keep telling it? Yes. Like I said earlier, Chip Zdarsky is just writing Batman the Knight this year. It was a 12-issue series, I believe, and in each issue, he's going and interacting with different mentors, right? And so we're seeing he gets, this little bit from here, and he gets this little bit from here, and he gets this little bit from here. And that's really interesting to me because it's not just skills, it's personality, traits that he's getting. And there's recently in the James Tynion Batman run, there was a new sort of anti-hero character named the Ghostmaker that was introduced. I don't really like him, but comics are improv. It's yes and, right? And so Chip Zdarsky's taking a character I don't really like, Ghostmaker, and sort of like introducing him to like, oh, they did have interactions as childhood friends, and like they are, again, it's another duality where like they're fighting, but like Ghostmaker's willing to break the rules that Bruce isn't, and like it's an interesting concept of like there's these different people that he opened up to along the way, and like, you know, violated his trust or, you know, caused him to be sort of more reclusive and sort of turn more inward towards himself. And that's a recontextualization that I really, really appreciate. And yeah, we're 80 years in and people are still kind of putting a new spin on it. And there's room to do it because you'd think, you know, that would have been sort of spent and sort of used up, and like there wouldn't be more room for a different way to recontextualize. But there is, totally. Likewise, Crisis on Infinite Earths is the first sort of hard reboot. There's lots of sort of like minor realignments that happen throughout. They call them crises. You know, people will say there was a crisis at this time, or like sometimes they're called Crisis. There's a book called Infinite Crisis. There's a book called Final Crisis. And those will sort of like retcon little bits of the continuity. Crisis on Infinite Earths is a total reboot. They did a total reboot where they totally started over as well in 2012 with Flashpoint, and that was the New 52. And that's an opportunity to sort of take some of the characters, turn them on their head, try it a different way, you know. And so I think it gets real old real fast if that's the only thing you ever get is origin stories. And I think especially in adaptations, in movies and television shows, they reach for it too much, I think, because they feel the need to introduce the character to people. But I certainly think in books it's not overdone, especially when each author comes and tries to put their own spin on it, right? Scott Snyder, who was the writer for Batman in the New 52, often talks about how he got advice. I think the advice might have been from Frank Miller. I'm not sure who it was. Some, you know, other author who was telling him as he was coming into the book, and he says, you know, make the character your own, give him your own beginning, you know, give him his own birth, and give him an end, give him your own death, right? And when people will look back on the character, they will say, oh, it's Scott Snyder's Batman, and that's a sort of distinct sort of thing that's different than everyone else's Batman. Frank Miller's Batman is different than, you know, he has a vision for it because he had a beginning, he had an end, and then told a bunch of stories in the middle. And so you have these different interpretations. So yeah, if you're making a movie, maybe not reaching for it, but like if you're trying to tell a story that explains character defects, that explains motives, that explains strengths and where they, you know, he found them. Yeah, absolutely. We should be telling the origin story. What about you? What do you think?
So this one's a little bit tough. Like I prefer the like Indiana Jones type of story where he just shows up and is a badass.
Sure.
You know, there's like Yoda.
Yeah.
We don't know what species he is.
Sure.
And there's like it might be written somewhere, but there's an unwritten rule that
Right.
like no one reveals that backstory because he's just kind of like this mystical character. And I think mystery being part of the character is valuable.
Totally.
It's really valuable.
I agree with that.
So Bruce Wayne and Batman are both mysterious characters, cagey about divulging any information and commonly holding her cards close to their chest. So like I think one of the things about the Joker that like granted this recent movie killed, but like the origin of Joker is sometimes hidden, right? Like there's the story of Red Hood, it's Red Hood, right, who falls into Ace Chemicals or whatever.
Yeah.
But there are also like the Dark Knight series where he just shows up.
Right.
And I like that a lot more, where he just shows up and you don't know anything about the backstory and he lies about his backstory in the story and stuff. And so like with Batman, he's just a human. There's not going to be this fun thing like Spider-Man where he goes through essentially a spider puberty and suddenly he has all these powers.
Sure.
And
It's
like
not a
exciting
coming of age
and fun,
story.
right?
Yeah.
It's dark, and so like the references in the movie The Batman, who just came out recently.
Yeah.
I appreciate where it's like his parents died, but they don't really go into detail about like that being a critical part of his origin, but rather bad things happened. He got angsty and angry, and then he used it in like a specific way to fight crime, in the vein of his parents trying to make the world a better place. You know, so like I appreciate that level of the origin story, but like diving in directly into like the alleyway and shooting I think it would be much more interesting to leave that unwritten, leave that mysterious, and let people wonder. Because similar to like Jaws, what your mind comes up with is far more interesting and scary than what they can put in film.
Yeah. I think I agree for the most part. I think especially when it comes to villains, there's a mystique that goes with not knowing. I think Joker is something where I really don't want to know who he is. There's Jeff Johns wrote a story called Batman 3 Jokers that's basically about this. Like,
Which is really fascinating.
It's a super interesting story. You should read it if you get the chance. Although, if you're not, if you're new to Batman, maybe don't start there because it builds on like decades of stories.
Yeah.
But like, it's basically a story that makes fun of you for wanting to know who the Joker is, right? I don't feel like we need to know who Joe Chill is. I don't feel like Batman needs closure on it. I think there's something valuable in the deceptive cadence. Are you familiar with the concept of deceptive cadence? Da 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 da.
Dun, dun.
No, see, if you finish it, you want to finish it. Something aches inside you when it finishes. But if you do the first half, da 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 da, and then nothing happens, it feels wrong, right? You've been
It's
tricked,
like
you've been
unresolved
hoodwinked.
chord. right?
Yeah. There's something about Batman's character that I think is fueled by the idea that there's something inside of him that can never be made whole. Right. And so when I say, yeah, we should definitely be telling the origin story, I mean, we should be trying to find new ways to spin it. I think we should be trying to find new ways to drive it. I don't mean that we should be taking away mystique. Right. I do think Batman does deserve a little bit more explanation than like, who killed Batman's parents. I don't think Joker needs the explanation. I think Bruce does because he's the point of view character, right? We are in his shoes. I want to understand his motivation to a degree. It is confusing and off-putting when he does things that are not explicable. There's Batman Nightfall storyline in the 90s. Batman gets hurt. Bane breaks his back, and he decides he's not going to be Batman. But not only is he not going to be Batman, he leaves. He like goes to Europe to hang out, I think, with a girlfriend or something like that. And it feels wrong. It's stupid. The motivation doesn't make any sense. They're doing it because they want to explore this other plot device, right? But readers hate that sort of thing because, like, why is he doing this thing? They don't explain to us why he's doing this thing. There's no monologue. There's no a standing character that's a point of view for us, for him to tell them that I'm going to England or to Europe because I need to, deal with XYZ problem. He just leaves, right? And it's like confusing because Batman wouldn't do that, right? And so I think the best characters are the ones where you have this feeling in your bones about like Batman would do this, Batman wouldn't do that. And I think in order for that to work, you do have to have some context, right? So it is a fine line to walk, to leave the mystery in place, to leave the mystique in place, but give us enough so that we feel like we know what makes him tick.
Yeah, I guess to build off of that, like I think it would be interesting to have to let writers do their own origin stories that could be different from the alleyway scene.
Sure.
Right? Like still give him that driving motivation, but be able to explore better or different or more interesting ways to have that origin than that. Like you can see in here, like there are some pieces that they change to see how it affects. Like in the movie The Batman, it starts to question if Thomas Wayne was a good person, you know, or like in I can't remember the comic name now. I'll be honest, reading all of these has my head spinning.
Sure. They blur together a little bit.
Yeah, but like the different ones where Thomas Wayne is a little bit overly aggressive towards Bruce,
I think it was the Batman Who Falls, but
so there's two of them. So the Man Who Falls is one of them.
Okay,
but I think maybe Batman 430 is the other one I'm thinking of. But gives some new context to why they went to the movies. There's another one we haven't talked about where Bruce feels responsible for them because he runs out of the theater into the alleyway and they chase him.
Right.
That's the one that starts out. I was just reading it. It's a really great story and I want to read all of it. It's the one that starts out with Alfred showing up to be a security guard. I think you read that one. Do you know?
Is it Earth 1?
Yeah, it's Earth 1, right? And I think that's super compelling because it like changes the context around the situation.
Sure.
But I would be really interested to hear origin stories. I guess, man, I feel really conflicted because there's so many ways to like live in the multiverse of Batman
Right.
and like allow for all these different ones, while also like allowing for one where they don't give you an origin story at all,
Right.
you know, and explore that.
Sure.
Because these are all like experiments that we can do.
And I think that's one of the cool things about DC is that they're willing to do all of that for you. Like if you're hardcore about like what happened, how did this go? Like they do have the continuity, right? So a lot of the ones we talked about today were like, okay, post-crisis, Denny O'Neill's running the shop, right? He tells Frank Miller to do this, and then he writes a story that does that, and they all kind of interweave, right?
Yeah.
But you're talking about a story you read, Batman Earth 1, which is part of the Dan DiDio era, right, in the 2000s, where it's a response to Ultimate Comics, the one I told you about a few episodes ago, where they did this other thing that was in another universe, wasn't connected in any way, wasn't part of a multiverse, wasn't, you know, Batman Earth 1's that. It's like Jeff Johns, they give him a graphic novel, and they say, just do your own thing. It's not connected. Start over. And he gets to do a different spin on it because he's not worried about making it connect with anything.
Right.
So likewise, you know, people who were kind of done with the post-crisis continuity, they did Flashpoint, they started over. So every once in a while they're starting over. Every once in a while they have these things called Elsewhere worlds where they're, you know, letting things live in their own pocket universes. They had Earth 1, which was kind of its own pocket universe thing, you know, and it's all there for you. You know, whatever you want, there's a version that you can take. You can get more of that origin story or recontextualization or not. It's up to you. And I think ultimately, what happens with all this is people end up with headcanons, right? There's like, okay, my Batman had this happen to him, but I didn't like that story, so it didn't happen to him, or, you know.
Oh, sure.
This motivation
Like
works
The
for
Matrix.
me, so. Sure.
If you like the show, then maybe you can help other people find us too. Tell your friends about the show if you think they'd be interested. If you're using Apple Podcasts, tap on the name of the show, scroll down, and find the place to give us a review. All you got to do is tap on the stars, but if you write a review, we will read it on the show. If you're using Overcast, hit the star at the bottom of the now playing screen to recommend us. It helps a lot. If we can build up an audience, then we can keep putting out episodes. You can find all of our episodes and show notes at batlistens.com. You can send us comments, questions, corrections, or even suggestions to contact@batlistens.com. Or you can tweet at us @batlistens. Until next time, I'm Brian Anders.
And I'm Alex Cash.
Thanks for listening.